This is an interesting transition, so I'm going to make it swiftly. This panel, if you look at the materials on your table, you'll see their bios, really impressive, right? But we have a tradition with this group that we go beyond the standard bio, so we're going to talk a little bit first about Stacy Putman. So what you may not know is that almost a third of this year she's been in Tokyo. So you can imagine what that's like during the pandemic, working 10,000 miles from home and the multiple visas that she's had to have for that particular work. Also, she's been a hospice volunteer for the last 6 years, and in fact is currently serving as coordinator at UTMB Galveston. That's awesome. Charles Neal, well, what's the best way to say this? Both son and father, 3 generations of proud Eagle Scouts. Pretty cool. Also, he has a love for the chemical industry, a true love for the chemical industry, and one that's a little bit unique because this is where he found his true love. See, about 22 years ago, he was a technical supervisor, I believe, and was required to train up a new production supervisor. And that production supervisor became his wife. And so we're not quite sure if that was the sunlight slanting through the chlorine cell, or if it was the 80,000 amps that it takes to run a chlor-alkali facility. But she became the love of his life. And so for many of you, that's a romantic story. For some in the industry, it's a chlor-alkali story. Last but not least, Monty Hines. Welcome back to Texas, Monty.
Thank you, Jim.
Monty's been up in Midland, Michigan the last 5 years. If you know Monty, you know where his true heart is, and that's Clemson University, and he's a Tiger. But what you might not know is there are 2 Tigers in the Heins house. Diane is a LSU Tiger. So what the audience wondered, Monty, in the 2020 championship game, #1, played #2, did Diane make you sing the LSU fight song after the game?
We had a pre-agreement that I wasn't going to do that, so I did it beforehand, and sure enough, LSU won that game, and we were there. So.
Monty and Diane have 2 children, and they are Aggie chemical engineers. All right, so we're going to get started now that you know a little bit more about our panel. We're going to talk a little bit about their professional roles. So, Stacy, will you start us off? Tell us about your role with INEOS.
Thanks, Jim, and good afternoon. The role I fill right now at INEOS is a really special role. It's a position that requires you to be a former plant manager. I was recently at the Lions Club in Alvin, and a retired Exxon president of that club said, "I don't think I've ever met a former female plant manager. You must be really old." And I said, "Yeah, I'm old enough anyway." The role I fill right now is the manager for leadership and workforce development. We added leadership to this role recently, and I'm so proud of that. The pandemic has left a really indelible mark on our workforce and on our leadership. It's a passion of mine to develop my own leadership and mentor and work with other leaders, and because that just makes such a big difference for our workforce. So I spend a lot of my time developing training, finding training, delivering training, and talking to our leaders about what we can do to make sure our employees are feeling included, they're feeling recognized, and they're feeling a part of INEOS in a way that's different because the pandemic has made us different. The other part of this role has nothing to do with people and everything to do with people, and I'm the manager of strategic projects, and you've heard a lot today about ESG, sustainability, and circular economy, so I get to use a lot of my technical background and work with the facilities still, which is where I love to be. I love to be outside, Jim. And so it's a really challenging role, and it's really exciting. Thank you.
I thought I had the coolest role in Harris County. I think you might.
Yes, thanks, yes.
Charles, tell us about your position with Kuraray.
Yes, Jim. I'm the brand new general manager for the PVOH business unit with Kuraray America. So PVOH is polyvinyl alcohol. which within Kuraray is POVAL, Kuraray POVAL. It's Elvenol. Within the same business, we have one of the Exavol lines. And then at the LaPorte site, where I had been plant manager prior to this role, we make vinyl acetate monomer, which is the raw material for the plant sites here in Houston. We ship a great deal of it over to Europe to run the European operations. But within that, there are two manufacturing facilities, LaPorte and Bayport. And then we have a tech services and development division, all of the logistics required to move the material to ourselves, to our customers overseas. And then there are other pieces that are needed to support the business.
And growing businesses with some advanced technologies.
Definitely. We're obviously, the Kuraray America is the American end of Kuraray Group, the global company based out of Japan. And there is a great deal of cutting-edge technology associated with what in some cases are very old products, trying to find new uses for recipes that have been around for a long time, and then also trying to meet customer requirements with new products at the same time.
Monty, what's going on at Dow?
Well, Dow, so I'm coming back from Michigan. You heard Jim say that, and when he was talking in his video clip, I really connected with his comments around being in the manufacturing, being in the middle of it, being in the plant, and all about the people. So coming back to Houston, to the Houston operations sites was really a great opportunity for me to get back and re-engage with the plants, our employees, the communities, all of that. So what's going on in our Houston site? So it's Deer Park, LaPorte, Bayport, and Texas City operations within Dow. As Charles mentioned, we also make vinyl acetate monomer, and we make monomers and coatings for one of the big business envelopes within Dow. And so we're seeing, and we'll discuss more, I'm sure, about demand is strong. You hear about that today, about our industry has changed dramatically in a year and a half time in terms of demand. And so we are working hard to be able to meet our customers' needs to get that product to them.
5 years ago, when we had Monty's going away party, we asked Diane what was the furthest north she's ever lived, and her answer, I think, was Baton Rouge. And so we knew if Dow didn't get him back to Texas, Diane will get him back to Texas.
And that is true.
So awesome positions with the three companies. I think a lot of the people in the audience would be interested in what was your path to get there? Because sometimes it's not just a straight line. Charles, you want to start us off there?
My path to get to where I am is I-10. I'm a true Southerner. I've never lived north of I-10. I have sometimes lived within sight of it, but no, I am a native Houstonian. Lived in Texas and New Mexico as I grew up. Dad was a banker, so we moved all around, but ended up in Brenham, where I graduated high school. Came back home to Houston to go to Rice, where I took a degree in chemical engineering. Decided the best way to apply my chemical engineering degree was in the Navy, doing nuclear power. That was a fun gig for about 6 years, at which point Occidental Chemical hired me into Florida. And Florida became Lake Charles became Deer Park. After I was married, my wife and I decided we should diversify paychecks, which led to DuPont in my case. I was quickly in a continued in technical roles within DuPont. Technical in DuPont quickly led to Six Sigma, and ended that as a master black belt. And the LaPorte site, as Kuraray acquired a piece of it, gave me an entry point to the Kuraray. I was the technology manager, from there to the plant manager, and then to here. So if you'd asked me 8 years ago when I was at the height of being a master black belt with DuPont, what are you doing in 8 years? I would have said master black belt with DuPont. So could not have predicted this part.
That's interesting. That's interesting career paths. Stacy, same question.
I think pretty much the same, right, Ronnie?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
Master Black Belt?
Master
Yeah.
Black Belt.
That's right, that's right. Actually, yeah, there are some similarities there. I started out with a degree in chemical engineering from a small school in West Texas in the Panhandle area, and came to work in the oil and gas industry. That's where I grew up around. That's what you were supposed to do. That's really was it, or Walmart. That was the choices that we had. So I love to shop, but I really, thought I'll go chemical engineering, super flexible. I spent a good part of my early career in consulting. So I was really fascinated with the Clean Air Act changes and what that was bringing about in the world. And so I spent a lot of time in that. And then PSM rules were written. I spent a lot of time consulting in that. And I joined industry in 2002. So I first started out in functional roles. Then I was working as a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. And then I got an invitation to California one afternoon. Came in very dirty, very sweaty in May. And my boss said, "How would you like to go to California and be a site director, plant manager?" I said, "But don't you want to hear the audit results?" Yeah, later. Let's talk about this new position. So I spent about 5 years out in California as site director, and then was invited to come back and participate in a very, very large capital project. I didn't know a lot about capital projects. I still don't know a lot about capital projects, but what I do know is when they ask you to do one that's got a turnaround and a debottleneck and a big expansion, and they say those are the hardest, most difficult ones to do and you should never do it, I can explain why you should never do it. I do know that. But we did successfully complete that project and very safely, and it's running really well. So then invited into this role. So I've had a lot of different leadership positions, and it's been a really fun ride. I get to talk to a lot of our new grads about, well, if I take a position with a big company like this, do I ever get to change in my career? Oh, definitely. You get chances to change your career. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Stacy.
Yeah, so I would add Stacy to what Stacy commented on about a big company and the opportunities to move and do different things. I've got 35 plus years with Dow, and the whole deal is you don't get bored because there's so many, great opportunities to do things that take you to different places that you never would have imagined, and different, different people, different communities that you get to spend time with. So, when I heard I'm a Clemson Tiger, so I left South Carolina to move to Baton Rouge, Louisiana to work for Dow and Plaquemine. And by the way, I started in chlor-alkali, making chlorine and caustic, and now that's all part of Olin. After you've been around as long as some of us have, you start to see in DuPont, been there, kind of how it all kind of rolls around. If you survive, as a company, you grow, you merge, you divest, you acquire, it's all of those things. So, Plaquemine, I was in that site for 12 years. And then I had the opportunity to come to the great state of Texas in early 2000. And by the way, everything in Plaquemine was manufacturing. So I've got 35 years, and it's pretty much all operations and manufacturing. While I was in headquarters the last 4.5 years up in Midland, I still had global responsibility for some operations around the company. Moved to Texas and was the plant leader for one of the chlor-alkali plants that now is gone. But it was the foundation for our light hydrocarbon 9 cracker in Oyster Creek, Texas, that is currently the world's largest cracker. So at least they built something that was world scale on top of the old chlor-alkali plant. I had the opportunity while I was in that part of Texas, too, to do what, at the time, I was like, what? You want me to do what? Go out and run mining and storage operations in a salt dome. And by the way, it's out at Stratton Ridge, if you know where that is, down in the Freeport area. And that was a unique experience, and one that I was like, well, I'm a chemical engineer. I make products. We make chemicals. But I learned so much from that experience, and I had geologists, and they would tell me about, we're probably going to have to address this underground storage cavern at some point in time. And I was like, okay, it's like 5 years, 10 years. Well, it could be 1,000. It's like, well, so you start to work with geologists, and things change. And I ended up having the opportunity as part of an acquisition to come up on the Houston Ship Channel, which was when Dow acquired Roman Haas, and that's where Deer Park and Bayport came into the picture, so I got involved from a technology management standpoint, and then moved on to a business manufacturing role, came back as the site leader for the Houston operations site, then went to Michigan and to headquarters, and then had the opportunity to come back again. So it's been quite a journey, 35 years and counting, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So.
Well, certainly a common theme with all three, lots of different experience. So if we're going to reach out to our students today, I mean, there's a great learning, right? Is you want to experience everything those plants and those opportunities have for you. Recently had a discussion with the retiring plant manager, and I said, any regrets? And he said, I was inquisitive, but I wish I would have been even more inquisitive in my job, because there's just so much to learn and so much to experience. Well, interesting path. I'm sure there were some challenges. So maybe Stacy, start us off. Give us, when you look back on those many experiences, tell us about a challenging time.
Well, we were talking about this back in the green room that's actually blue and black, but we were talking in the green room about there's really not anything in my memory of my career that's been more challenging than lately of what's going on. Let's add a freeze into a pandemic, into a lot of social justice issues that are super important and need to be addressed. It's been a very challenging last few years. But that builds on what are some of the constant challenges in our industry, and that is keeping our people safe, our assets safe for our neighbors and our community. And so one of the issues that I got to tackle was when we were purchased. And as much as we want to say that, it's all a chemical industry and we all speak the same language, we don't always all actually speak the same language. And so one of the great challenges that I got to work on was some of the transition between companies around safety. And although we were being purchased, the influence that we got to have and the opportunity to educate, create awareness, and bring some industry standards to the company that was purchasing us was just fabulous. And they were so welcoming after several conversations about what we could do. And that was a big challenge, because we had made a lot of progress in our safety journey, and just introducing that and having that influence was really a good challenge, but we weren't sure where it was always going to land. And the risk was that we would create some confusion. The risk was that our safety messages were no longer going to be as crystal clear as they needed to be. And so, having been safety manager for our company, that was a big challenge for me, because I felt like that was going to be threatened a bit. And today, everybody's on the same page. We speak the same language, the same type of English when it comes to safety. And I'm really proud of that and where we got to on that.
It's interesting when we get with a group like y'all, how experienced you are in safety, especially safety culture and behavior, and what it takes to lead those kind of changes and improvements. Monty, how about in your career? When you look back on the challenges, what would you like to highlight for us today?
Well, I think I come back to Stacy's comments too around the pandemic, and just, and maybe this overshadows some of the challenges of the past because it's been so significant, and we hear that today. I mean, that's been a lot of the topic of today's conversation. But, there's also so much about the frontline workers, right? Well, to run our plants, we essentially had frontline workers too. And, in keeping them safe and healthy so that we can run those 24/7 operations and still provide some of the basic raw materials, even at the trough of the worst of the pandemic, there was still a demand to make the products, because we have so many building blocks that are essential to human and life and, and health. And, and so just figuring out how to do that, was a huge pull on everybody in operations in the company, and making, and managing for quarantines if people were infected. And then just how do you pull off doing turnarounds, where you're bringing in hundreds, if not thousands of workers, and how are you going to protect all of those employees, both contract service providers as well as the company employees themselves together? And you know, it's just kind of paled in, you know, I was thinking about a question like that, and it just kind of paled in comparison to anything else in recent times. So that one just strikes me as being something that I'm very proud of, how our industry has been able to do that so well.
And we're just going to reach out to the audience really quick. We've got some good questions here, but as an audience, if you have some questions you'd like to ask, we'll see those on the prompter and certainly work those in. Talk about a little bit about leadership. So you've started off in technical roles, but now your role is less technical, much more leadership. So Charles, tell us a little, maybe your biggest learning in leadership or some experience around the leadership acumen.
Let's see, with respect to leadership, especially the more you grow or rise within the company, the less you know. You go from being the absolute subject matter expert to that is leveraged, and you move up and you're suddenly responsible for a great deal that you know very little in detail about. It requires, we talk about delegation, we talk about responsibility, we talk about authority, but it requires the confidence that the people who work for you are doing their jobs. And you rely upon that. There's you know, in the behind the closed doors, you can kind of quip that you're responsible for everything that goes wrong, but you get to take credit for everything that goes right. And hopefully those balance out at the end of the day. But leadership at that level is really about the people you're leading. You've got to let go of your own self and your own ego, because you're spending so much time making sure that the people who are part of the team have the resources that they need, get the roadblocks knocked out of the way, are themselves developing, growing within the company, being given the opportunities to succeed, trying to meet objectives, trying to meet budget. It comes at you really fast, and there's not a lot of time for self in that particular avenue.
It's an interesting transition, isn't it, from being the SME, the subject matter expert, to now you're swimming in a pond where, you know, those other people are the subject matter experts. Community, right? Your plants are in the community, and I had one of my best plant managers told me, Jim, the community allows you in the neighborhood, your responsibility is to be a good neighbor, right? So tell us a little bit about your community engagement. Monty, you want to start off with that?
Sure, Jim. You know, I think first it starts with collaboration and partnership with the community, and we do that through the community advisory committees and the LEPC, and ECMA is a good way that we also engage with the communities. And then there's volunteerism and giving back to the community. And you know, you think about that from the perspective of things like Habitat for Humanity, as we talk about plastic waste, where we're going and cleaning up plastic waste from beaches and waterways and things like that. United Way campaign, which I think I've given to all of my years working with the company, and just recently moving back from Michigan. It's campaign season, by the way, and you know, I was getting solicited for campaign contributions up in Michigan. I was like, no, I need to make sure I've changed to the Houston area so that my contributions are going to the community here. And thankfully, they've already done that so that I can get that done. And then I think part of it is recognizing that so much of our talent comes from these communities. And so part of that giving back and the workforce development that's going on through ECMA and that Stacy leads for ECMA is critically important. It provides great jobs, and it's an opportunity to reinvest in that community to get, and so we still have much opportunity to enhance that pipeline, really thinking about how we can increase the diversity of the community in our pipeline of talent coming in.
Excellent. So, Stacy, I'm going to flip this over to you because I know you need to talk about the community. You're very engaged, and INEOS as a company is very engaged. You were our first sponsor at the Lyndale Basalt Center for Petrochemical Energy and Technology, and got INEOS got everything started. So tell us a little bit about your view on community.
Our view is very similar. We are here and operate in this community wherever our plants are located, where our rail cars roll through, where our salesmen drive into different towns, really at the pleasure of the community, and we appreciate that, and we try our best to treasure that and respect that. A key piece to understanding about how to be a good neighbor in that community is really to understand the history and traditions of the communities where we operate, because they're different everywhere. And the best way we can do that is to understand that the people that are in the community that come to work for us, the people in the community that we interact with, whether we're buying services, buying products, it's where we live, it's where we drive through, it's all a part of our community, and how do we behave as that neighbor in that community is so important. So it was really interesting to me when I moved to California, and y'all don't exist in California. When I asked about the CAP, the what? When I asked about something like ECMA, the who? It is amazing what we have here, and I missed it so badly. And so we kind of started a little bit of it out there. But it's a part of us also working together for the community, because we do all bring in different views. Each community college I've learned so much from in this new role about what those students and those families need to hear. What those mamas and daddies and grandmothers want for their grandkids is what I want for my grandkids. And that's to have a good, safe future. And so how do we engage and do that better? It's literally sitting with them, family by family, school by school, talking to them. It's like any other change, any other leadership moment that we have. It's one person at a time, it's one family at a time, and it's hard, and it takes time. But it's worth it. It's the most important thing that we can do as leaders. One person, one family, one school at a time.
Excellent. We're going to transition then from community to some of our questions from the audience. The first one is regarding workforce. And I think the audience is interested. What are you seeing in the workforce? Are you getting what you need? What are the challenges? Who would like to start?
I'll jump in. Thank you. So I recently read, and you should too if you haven't, the Deloitte 2021 report on hiring. It's doomsday. Between now and 2030, we're going to be over 500,000 people short in manufacturing. Well-written report. We've heard about those reports for years. Yesterday, as one of our local plants here, and I was talking to the HR manager, and I said, what are you seeing? Are you having trouble filling positions? I'm talking to some of the other HR folks, and they said, not yet. Not so far. But our concern is what the pandemic has done, not only at the community college level, but at the high school level, from an education standpoint and an enrollment standpoint. So there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a deficit, potentially. And so what are we doing about it? And we have to think creatively. We've got to think out of the box. We might have to change our standards. We heard earlier a company, Pinnacle, is hiring people right out of high school, and they're going to train them up. I know that Dow does some really interesting things with their entry-level operators and technicians, and how forget about the education. We're going to hire for personality, capability, learners, those kind of things. And I think that's what this generation that's hiring in now and the future generation really are going to need to hear from us. And so that's going to give us some opportunity to make some changes that may be really interesting to our existing workforce, to actually step into those roles and help those people come on. So I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge in the near term that's going to lead to a bigger challenge in the long term if we don't engage and get folks over here. Because we are the chemical industry, and maybe it could look a little more fun. Maybe it could look like it's kind of groovy.
We're going to take another question from the audience. And Monty, I'm going to have you start this one off because of your role that you had when you were up in Midland, Michigan. So there's some questions about digital transformation, right? And, we go into your control rooms, and they're very complex, and you've got DCSs pulling in all kinds of data and turning that data into information. You've got all kinds of AP going on. Tell us, what does that world look like? You visited Dow plants across the globe. You probably have a good look at. So what does it look like today, and what do you see in the future?
Good question, Jim. Thanks for that one. What I can tell you is that we're really focused on how do you get digitally connected in the field. I mean, that's the real, you heard about data analytics and AI, but right now it's like how do we take advantage of getting digitally connected in the field to reduce low-value work, to really increase productivity, improve the employee experience, quite honestly. When you think about so many things that we can do with apps and stuff from home that we haven't necessarily been able to do in our industry. So it's really trying to accelerate that first and foremost. And so we launched last year in the middle of the pandemic and did a lot of this virtually, a digital manufacturing platform in our Freeport site. So we went with our largest site in the company to go do this, and we have brought in private LTE network capability to get wireless throughout our sites. And so we're deploying, tools and devices in the field that are allowing our field-connected professionals, we call it, to be out in the field and do things without having to go back to the control rooms or without having to manually enter data that uploads into the cloud. And so, and the folks that are using it are like, this is the best thing since sliced bread, with good triple coated plastic wrapping around it, like we heard earlier from BJ this morning. But anyway, so that has, and now we've already announced that we're going to go do that at our largest site in the Netherlands and another site in the U.S. Gulf Coast. And it really is, and from an operational standpoint, it seems like the next logical low-hanging fruit, opportunities to go grab, even before you get into some of the AI capabilities and so that you can have real-time data of what your plants do and in the field without having to pick up a radio and call the control room. So we can do a lot more decision-making where it needs to happen in real time, and that's going to be significant. And I think, if we talk about our technical colleges as well, it's about, really kind of ramping up our plants to partner with the technical colleges to start to advance those tools, even in part of educating it, the skilled workforce is the more capability to use those tools as much as learning how the process works.
You mentioned Freeport. Some of the folks really don't have much experience with it. Tell them the size of your Freeport facility. That's a big swing at the plate to roll out your new technology.
Yeah, I mean, Freeport, I don't know that I can quote actual numbers on it, but it has been the largest chemical manufacturing complex in North America and actually in the Northern Hemisphere. I think there's a BASF site in Germany that's bigger.
I can flywheel from there by way of an analogy. So we go from clipboards and we're writing lots of information on the clipboards, and those sheets of paper go into the filing cabinet. We digitize that. So now I have a digital filing cabinet, and my engineers can do wonderful things with it. We have an incident in the plant and give them a couple of days, and they can take it apart and tell you exactly what happened and tell you how, if only we had looked, we would have seen it happening days, hours, weeks, months ahead of time. Digital transformation has got to include that. I don't need a digital filing cabinet so much as I need a digital assistant who's always looking at that data, who understands when it moves off of the norm and can raise that flag and say something's not right before it becomes an incident, while we can still stop the corrosion, while we can prevent the off-spec material. Digital transformation is that big data analytics. It's taking all that information that's coming in and actually making it work for us in a way that takes it to that next level. So my engineers are coming in saying, this is what's going on and we need to fix it, rather than it's broken. We can't afford the it's broken anymore.
It's an exciting time with technology.
Very much.
Is Jim Radcliffe a technology guy?
Boy, is he ever. Our sailboats, is it okay to call them a boat? Our sailboats for the America's Cup were so high-tech. Our dragon ships, they are so high-tech. I have a feeling that whenever Eliud broke the 2-hour marathon record, there was a lot of technology in his training plans. But yes, our facilities are highly instrumented. We're always pushing to figure out how better to use that technology. One of the things about bringing the technology to bear in our jobs is it's an opportunity for inclusion of people. I know most of us heard the unfortunate event that happened with Google with their driverless cars, where the car didn't recognize a person jaywalking their bike across the street. Obviously, that was in Arizona, not in Texas, where jaywalking is a right that we hold on to. And so the thing about including more technology, including AI, machine learning, things like that, you've got to have a really inclusive mindset when you're designing that. And that's what those new generations are going to be able to bring to us.
Well, I guess we need to talk about COVID just a little bit. We've been at this for 18 months. I'm sure 18 months ago, if we'd have had this discussion, maybe over a few cold beers, we would not have forecasted that we would have these restrictions this far out. So what have your learnings been? I know you're the kind of folks, you take those kind of challenges and turn them into opportunities. What have been the learnings within your companies?
For Kuraray, kind of twofold. I'd say we're certainly not big enough to be the line leader when it comes to what are we going to do. But at the same time, we have to make decisions for our own employees. All of the employees, it doesn't matter what they do, what their job is, are being bombarded with a huge amount of information. Whether it's news, social media, their friends and neighbors, and most of it is suspect. So being in front of it all as the company saying, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. At the height of the pandemic, first wave or second wave, whichever one we were in, last spring and then into the summer, the economy is getting smaller, the plants were pumping the brakes, the employees are concerned, and being in front of that situation, explaining, where it's going, why it's here, what we're doing. It's different now than it was a year ago. The treatments are there. The vaccine obviously is there. The economy has been improving, but yet the pandemic is ongoing. And there's this continuing response that is required, which is now hopelessly muddled with regulatory, with politics, but it still requires us as the leaders in the company to be in front of it, to say, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. That felt leadership is probably one of the key learnings, that like any other crisis the company has gone through, we have to communicate.
There was a turnaround question, so I'll maybe weave this into COVID. How do you do a turnaround during COVID? I'm sure you're impacted everything from supply chain to contractor availability. Tell us about that process.
We had a 5,000 person turnaround that started about 2 weeks after COVID started, officially as called a pandemic. And so it was our first pandemic. It was not our first turnaround, but it was also not our first crisis and not our first major risk. Some of the comments that you just made, Charles, were about the media and extra information that may or may not be helpful. That happens during storms. This was a massive storm. People were afraid to come to work. We gave them space to deal with that as we all figured out, how do we handle this risk? We're highly trained in our industry for crisis management and risk management. We had to wrap our head around it repeatedly. How big is the risk? The risk is changing. Some of us have been through storms that change. This was an ever-changing storm for us. So there was a lot of patience, but there was a lot of clarity of message. And as you said, it's about communication from the leadership. And so we had to make sure our leaders were there and that they had that message and they were equipped. We got through the turnaround. It was extended. in part for a lot of reasons. We couldn't get supplies in. The port was backed up. Other things were backed up. We went through so many bottles of hand sanitizer. We ran out of hand sanitizer. Our company converted 6 plants to make hand sanitizer. So you do what you have to do in a hurricane. You do what you have to do in a crisis to keep your people safe. You evaluate that objective every day. Is it still the right objective? Do we need to make changes to that objective? So we found eventually we have the skills to deal with this. We had to add tools to the toolbox for this type of a crisis, and we hope we never use them again. But I imagine that our future crisis management training will include pandemics.
Yeah, I would like to add, too, that I think our maintenance and construction partners were in the middle of that. When you talk about the turnarounds, you know, while the company may be leading what was required and how you're going to protect workers, and it was, you know, the vast majority of the people coming into our facilities to do that work were not our employees. So we had to have this really strong collaboration and partnership with all of our service providers to protect their employees, to protect our employees, and to manage through that. I visited a couple of turnarounds in progress during the, you know, let's say the higher level of pandemic concern last year. And, you know, and I was, you know, expecting that I was going to run into a bunch of workers out in the field that weren't wearing their mask. And it was summertime in Freeport, and so hot, you know, but just, you know, everybody was doing what they had to do, you know, and stepping up. And so I think, you know, that partnership made all the difference in those turnarounds being successful, and just reinforced the importance of the relationships that we have.
There's a lot of service providers and contractors here today, and you know, these plant managers could not do their job, you know, without you, and especially your safety records, because it's phenomenal, right? I mean, the safety, and we're going to get into safety in just, we got a few minutes left, we'll do that. You said your turnaround was 5,000 people?
Oh, we had capital projects layered within, so it just, you know, made it so much more fun. Why not do everything at once, right? Who needs a jack to change a tire? That's okay. We're going to do it that way. So yeah, that was the final head count I was given and they told us we're glad to have a job, because by the time it was last summer and things had been going on for a few months, and they realized what was going on in the rest of the world, restaurants shutting down, businesses closing. But they could come to work every day. They could be a whole watch. They could be a flagger. They could be a welder, and we needed them. And once that mentality set in, that shift, we got close, even closer.
So that was Chocolate Bayou.
Yes, sir.
So the significance of that, you might remember last year, one of our panel members, Kathy Culpepper, and Kathy's a plant manager of that site, and she talked a little bit about that challenge, and I think we all agreed she was probably the most courageous plant manager in the bunch to take on that big a project and do it, and obviously do it successfully. So congratulations. So let's talk a little bit about safety. We did look at your safety records, all three companies prior to this. You got some amazing results, and I know you could give an entire seminar on safety. So tell us a little bit about how you get those impressive safety results. Charles, can you start us off?
Sure, Jim. It begins, safety requires everybody. I mean, that's more than just a slogan. We cannot get the records that you're talking about, the statistics that are looked at when we're evaluated as companies, without every individual making the right choice every time, every minute, every job, every task, because it just takes one mistake. It takes one bit of absent-mindedness to end in a personal injury or an incident in the plants. To get there requires a mindset. We're constantly fighting complacency. Complacency is one of the worst enemies when it comes to a safety record. It is easy to stand on a safety record and say, we've nailed this, we've got it. And that's when you've set yourself up for something to happen. It takes eyeballs, it takes people, it takes all five senses out in the field, constantly checking what's different, what's not right, what doesn't feel right. I'll come back to communication. When something isn't right, that has got to get passed along, forwarded, whether it's a work order or a shift turnover note, or just stopping by an office and saying, can you join me in the field? I want to show you something. There's very little in our industry that gets better by ignoring it, and we just can't ignore it. We can't leave it for the next shift. We can't leave it for turnover. It's got to be addressed in the moment.
Excellent. Continuous improvement. So we heard earlier discussions about the amazing improvements over the last 20 years. And of course, you've got big assets, very expensive. You work on continuous improvement every day. You try to get better every day. Tell us a little bit about that in the Dow organization. Monty, how do you keep moving the ball forward in continuous improvement?
Well, I think, Jim, it really starts with measuring your performance, having the opportunity to look at where you are and how do you setting the bar for the next opportunity, even if you don't know how to get there in terms of performance. When we talked earlier, one of the big ones that we're focused on is the digital connectivity in the plants. We discussed that earlier, and we see that as an opportunity to continuously improve in that you are able to digitize a lot of data. As Charles was mentioning, it used to be manually collected and then put in a filing cabinet and eventually thrown away. But did we ever use that data to look at our process to say, are we seeing trends before they happen? And so at least within our company, we've got a lot of focus on continuous improvement to go to the next level of performance by using some of the digital capabilities.
Okay. We're running, I guess we're just in our last few minutes here. I'm checking to see if there's any last questions that need to be asked or answered. So we'll just close by talking to the audience how engaged you are in the community. The Pasadena Livestock Show and Rodeo, I would be remiss if I didn't say that it opens tomorrow. And all three, I understand, Stacy, you're going to do some barrel riding. And,
Yes.
And Monty and Charles are going to team rope. So we really appreciate your
I'm
commitment to the
mutton
rodeo.
I'm mutton busting.
Mutton busted. So that's how versatile these plant managers are. They go straight from the plant over to the rodeo. On behalf of everyone here, and especially the Economic Landsport region, thanks for your time. We know how busy you are. Congratulations on all your success, and thank you to your companies for your participation in our community. You guys are awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.